Hello, welcome to Steven Shinder Reviews in Video Form. I'm finishing my review series of Star Wars Skeleton Crew, talking about the finale titled The Real Good Guys. And yeah, that title really makes me think of, obviously it's set in the episode, but reminds me of the Goonies, like they're they're the bad guys, these are the good guys or whatever they say. But yeah, going into this finale, I'd been saying that looking back on the show, it feels like, reflecting on the story, the overall the story feels kind of bare bones to a point where there's not as much to talk about. So, I was coming into this wondering if I'm gonna like retroactively give sevens to some of the previous ones or something. But I think I'm sticking with the ratings that I gave each episode. This finale, I thought was another solid eight. It stuck the landing, and it didn't. This show isn't one that shook up the Star Wars universe, but it wasn't really seeking out to, so it's fine. It's just trying to be a fun romp, and it was. So yeah, I think the overall average for the season would be like 7.9 if I were to like average everything, which sounds about right. I guess this would make it my fourth favorite live action season of a Star Wars show. Mandalorian season one and Andor season two are at the top, followed by Mando season three. Because yeah, I like Mandalorian season three more than two because less reliance on returning familiar characters and all that. So yeah, I think this one is in fourth place for me out of those seasons. And so going into the the Goonies aspect of it, it's kind of coincidental. This finale came out shortly before the 40th anniversary screenings of the Goonies. uh, I think that happens like this weekend or this Sunday or something, and it kind of makes me want to go out and see the Goonies on the big screen. Will I do that? I don't know. It'll depend on whether I feel like it. Like there's just so much going on. I've lots of work I've been doing and some stuff I've had to focus on. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I thought this was a really fun show. I do think that it works well as a TV show. I'm not really sure if it would have worked well had it been a theatrical film, the same story, just truncated into a movie length runtime. Because I feel like if it had been a film, maybe some of us would have been like, well, we came out to the theater for this. So, especially if it were the first Star Wars theatrical film in like 5 years or whatever. It's gonna be interesting to see how the Mandalorian and Grogu movie handles things. Like those episodes of that show have a bit more of a movie feel in some of them. Even the season three episode, the pirate, I think it was called. The one with Gorian Shard and that introduces Vane. I think that feels like a more breakneck movie type sequences. So I feel like if they were to really go all out with a pirate Star Wars movie, it would be more swashbuckling, faster, more intense, as someone once said, you know? Um, Whereas, with the TV shows, they do slow down a bit in some instances, and there's this Skeleton Crew is not a full on pirate show. It's like the Goonies. It's kids who are dealing with stuff kind of related to pirates and looking for treasure and stuff, but it's not a full on pirate movie. Whereas if there were ever a theatrical film, focus on Hondo and his crew, maybe the Crimson Corsair, Kicks, maybe please bring in Kicks. You don't even have to take the helmet off of him, but um, I think that'd be really cool as a theatrical Star Wars movie and show people like what's the difference between a Star Wars show and a Star Wars film? I mean, it's not all cut and dry. It's very there's a bit of overlap, but I think people would get the sense of what is being saved for the theatrical releases. I still think Obi-Wan Kenobi should have been a film and Solo should have been a TV show, but I mean that's a whole other thing there. Um, so this episode rather, this finale. So going into the details of it, I assume that y'all have already seen it. It does touch on how this idea of good guys versus bad guys, and that's kind of pointed out as being kind of yeah. Jod points out that it's kind of naive to just think in those terms, um, and alluding to how it's more complicated than that. And it's funny because when we think of Star Wars, the original trilogy, it really is just good guys and bad guys, and there's not much in between. Later stuff sort of fleshed that out a bit more. But since these are kids, they have this idea of just everything's black and white, and so of course from their perspective, they're just good guys and bad guys and nothing in between. Um, and Jude Law as Jod, he is such a hateable character, but there's also a moment where it's like that he didn't want things to go too far, where he's like it didn't have to be like this, when they're all worrying about KB and whether uh, she's a goner, which I knew she wouldn't be a goner, but the reactions felt believable, if you just put yourself in those characters' shoes there. And yeah, we got a little bit of Jod's backstory that he, when he was a kid, a Jedi saw potential in him until, uh, that Jedi was gunned down, and I assume that that was during Order 66. How old was Jod when he got brought into the Order? Was he an exception where he was brought in as maybe an older kid, kind of like Anakin? I'm not really sure how old he is, so like how old he would have been during Order 66, but yeah, it does make me wish even more that the first episode of the Bad Batch, that it had not been Kanan and Depa Billaba that we'd seen there, because we'd seen that story in the Kanan comics, and it had no place in the Bad Batch story. It very well could have just been some other Jedi Padawan and a mentor, different mentor, and in hindsight, like I kind of wish that Jod had been that Padawan. That would have fit really nicely. But on the other hand, there is something kind of nice about how his past doesn't connect too much to something from before, at least as far as we know. They don't give us too many specifics, and I'm fine with that. Later stuff, maybe even books and comics might share some specifics. I mean, when you think back to the original Star Wars, the backstory is like, oh, the Jedi fell, they were, killed or whatever, and we don't get all the specifics, but it's enough for us to go on for that story, and it's until later, the prequels and everything connected to them, that we get the specifics. So I don't feel shortchanged that the explanation for Jod's backstory was very quick. It felt very natural and organic in the context that he provided it. So yeah, I was satisfied with that. I do think the ending felt a little bit abrupt. Like I would have kind of liked a few more minutes. Denouement, a bit more cleanup, I guess. But yeah, it kind of had the half hour ish runtime that a bunch of these episodes have had, and I've been fine with that runtime for most of the episodes, if not all of them, prior to this. But here, I think they could have allowed a little bit more room to breathe at the end. So, yeah, those are my 2 cents on that, my 2 credits, what have you. Um, I know I said earlier that a full-on Star Wars movie would have more of a faster speed pacing rather. There were bits of that during like the flying and stuff here, so it wasn't without those moments. But reflecting on the show overall, there's some slower pace stuff, but it never felt boring to me. But I can see how Star Wars films, especially ones that get put out going forward, whenever, like how those could be different from this approach here. Now, will we see these characters again? I mean, I don't. Well, maybe they'll be in one of the future films. There's a rumor. I haven't like looked into like the validity of some of this, but a rumor that they could be in a future film. I don't know if it's Mandalorian or Grogu or whatever. I think there might be like something else in the works. I don't know. I'm just not gonna like speculate, but um, if there were a second season, they've said that if there were a second season, they'd want to do a time skip because obviously these kid actors have gotten older. So I would be interested in seeing what a story with these characters in a season two would be like. But I'm not really expecting a second season. I don't know what the viewership is like. But like I've said, I've been like really busy. But I didn't see many people on my end talking about this show. People outside of my Star Wars bubble, just like the general public or even on social media and stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was just a one and done. And I mean, it does feel like a self contained story. So they were able to accomplish that. And, I'd be fine with it. But I wouldn't mind seeing these characters, this skeleton crew, I guess that's what we'll call them, in some other stories, popping up once in a while. So, yeah, overall, I thought this was a fun show. Um, Best Star Wars of 2025 so far. Yeah, I know it's a stupid joke. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what else comes out this year. Star Wars Visions Season 3. I'm really excited about that. I think there's a couple, books, comics. We'll see if there's video game stuff. And, I think the High Republic is wrapping up this year. And there's also Acolyte book tie ins. Even though I had issues with the structure of the show, I'd be interested in seeing how the books handle some of those characters and also how the High Republic, which is a while before the Acolyte, how that um, initiative, how that series of books wraps things up. Because I've really enjoyed a good chunk of that era, but yeah, good time to be a Star Wars fan, at least from where I'm sitting. And it helps that I'm not as in the thick of it as I used to be. It was good to take a step back from certain things. And yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's my Skeleton Crew rating. 8 out of 10 for the finale, 7.9, I guess, for the entire season. I'm glad I watched it and looking forward to whatever else comes out. So thanks for tuning in and see you all soon.